Tripoli Harbor. May 1801, the Mediterranean is glass this morning, blue, motionless, hiding its depth. A single American frigate cuts through the calm, its hull painted black and gold, the stars and stripes fluttering where the royal ensigns of Europe once ruled. Below deck, sailors wipe sweat from their eyes. The air smells of pitch, rope, and salt pork. Above them, Lieutenant Andrew Sterrett stands with a spyglass trained on the low brown coast of Africa. Tripoli, a kingdom of sand and sails, ruled by a man who sells peace like a ransom. Jefferson's letter lies folded in his coat. It is the policy of the United States to prefer peace, but we will buy it with steel rather than gold. Sterrett repeats it under his breath as the harbor fort appears through haze. Two crumbling towers, their cannon mouths black as the debt they demand. For 2 decades, American merchants have paid tribute to the Barbary states. Gold, muskets, even a warship. The price of sailing is free, but this new republic has had enough. When Tripoli's Pasha demanded more, Congress answered with silence, and silence meant war. In the harbor, Corsair ships rock at anchor, sleek xebecs painted crimson, their decks crowded with men in turbans and curved blades. The call to prayer echoes over water like a challenge. At noon, the first shot comes not from the fort, but from the American frigate president. A white plume, a crack of thunder. The ball skips across the harbor and smashes into the fortress wall. Tripoli's gunners answer, too high, too wild. The duel lasts an hour, then smoke hides everything. When it clears, the American sails away untouched. The message is clear. Tribute is over. Washington, summer 1801, Thomas Jefferson's hand trembles slightly as he seals another letter with wax. To Commodore Dale, proceed to the Mediterranean and protect American commerce. No declaration, no drums, just a quiet order that will define the young republic. America is barely 25 years old, but it is about to challenge empires 4 centuries older. Europe watches with amusement. Britain doubts they'll last a month. France calls it arrogance. The Ottoman court in Constantinople calls it folly. Tripoli, winter 1802, the war drags. American frigates blockade the coast, but the Corsairs slip out at night, their lateen sails vanishing into moonlight. They capture crews, strip them, sell them. In Tripoli's market, slaves are paraded under arches built by Rome. Among them stand Americans, sunburned, barefoot, their eyes hollow. The Pasha smiles from his balcony. He believes hunger and humiliation will break the foreigners. But across the sea, a new commander prepares something no one expects. A war waged not by fleets, but by footsteps, Alexandria, March 1805. A thin man with a weathered map spreads it on a crate. William Eaton, former consul to Tunis, speaks quietly to the officers around him. His voice carries the exhaustion of exile and the spark of conviction. We march from Egypt to Derna, he says. 500 miles of desert. If we take the city, Tripoli falls. The men exchange glances. It sounds impossible. Yet behind Eaton stands a small figure in blue. First Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon of the United States Marine Corps, 27 years old. Calm eyes. A saber at his side. Their plan borders on madness. Cross a desert ruled by tribes, survive on dates and salt water, and attack a city defended by thousands. Their force? 8 Marines, a handful of Greek mercenaries, and 400 Arab soldiers loyal to Hamid Karamanli, the Pasha's exiled brother. A rebellion bought with promises. The British captain observing in Alexandria writes in his diary, "The Americans embark on a mirage." Desert of Cyrenaica, April 1805. Dawn reveals an army that barely qualifies as one. Camels groan beneath barrels of water. Bedouins argue over pay. The Americans march beside them, boots sinking into red sand. O'Bannon walks with his musket over his shoulder, face blistered. Eaton writes in his journal, "The desert is an anvil. It will test the mettle of our nation. By noon, heat shimmers like water. By night, the stars burn white and cold. Men faint, camels collapse, rations rot." A Marine named Peel notes, "We drink vinegar to kill the thirst." Yet they keep moving, east, always east. Behind them, the Nile fades. Ahead, only dunes and mirage. The locals begin to whisper that no Christian army has ever crossed this land alive. On the 12th day, a sandstorm hits. The sky disappears. Men tie ropes to stay together. When the storm clears, half their camels are gone. Eaton kneels in the sand and digs out a small chest. Inside, the U.S. flag wrapped in oilcloth. He stares at it for a long time, then whispers, "We carry this across the world or we die trying." They march again. Each step is a heartbeat, each mile a prayer. Somewhere ahead lies Derna, the first city an American army will ever conquer on foreign soil. Tripoli. Winter 1803. In the palace above the harbor, Pasha Yusuf Karamanli sits beneath a ceiling of painted stars. The scent of incense mixes with gun oil. Outside, his guards parade chain prisoners, sailors from the ship Philadelphia. Their capture has made him a hero in his own eyes. The Americans sent a frigate into his waters, and now that ship lies at the bottom of the harbor, burned by its own crew. The Pasha laughs. He tells his scribes to write a message for the foreign press. The infidels destroy their own ships out of fear. He underestimates what fear looks like in a nation born from rebellion. On the other side of the sea, the burned timbers of Philadelphia become a symbol, not of defeat but of resolve. Captain Stephen Decatur, who led the raid to destroy it, is toasted in every American port. Lord Nelson himself calls it the most daring act of the age. For Tripoli, it is humiliation. For Washington, it is proof that honor can cross oceans. But the Pasha has a longer game. He believes the Americans will grow tired, that Congress will count coins instead of courage. In his letter to his brother Hamet, now exiled in Egypt, he writes, "The Yankees are merchants. They buy peace and sell threats." Hamet's reply never reaches him. William Eaton intercepts it in Alexandria and studies the handwriting as if it were a battle plan. "The Pasha mocks our will," he tells Lieutenant O'Bannon. Then we'll answer him in the only language he respects. Desert of Cyrenaica, April 1805. After 20 days, the desert begins to swallow the army whole. Men hallucinate rivers that aren't there. One Marine dies of fever. Bedouin guides demand more gold and threaten to leave. O'Bannon writes in his small journal, "Our progress is measured by graves." At dawn, the column halts on a ridge overlooking a mirage that doesn't fade, white walls and a green banner waving above them. Derna. The city lies between sea and desert, guarded by Tripolitan soldiers loyal to Yusuf. Eaton studies the defenses through a brass telescope. Earthen forts on each flank, 6 guns along the shore, and 1,000 men waiting behind the walls. The American flag he carried across the desert is blackened with dust. He cleans it carefully and turns to O'Bannon. "If we raise it here, the message reaches Tripoli itself." That night he writes a letter to the city's governor. "We come not as conquerors, but as liberators. Deliver the city to Hamet Karamanli and no blood need be shed." The answer comes at sunrise. 2 cannon shots that whistle overhead and bury themselves in the sand. Eaton doesn't hesitate. "So be it," he says. Forward, the army divides. O'Bannon and his Marines move along the coast toward the western battery, while Hamet's tribal fighters circle east to cut off the road from Tripoli. As they advance, local villagers appear on the cliffs, silent, watching this strange army. Americans in blue coats, Greeks with cross belts, Arabs chanting verses, and a single flag none of them have seen before. When the first American gun fires, it echoes against the cliffs like thunder trapped in stone. Eaton commands from the front, musket in hand, shouting orders between bursts of smoke. O'Bannon leads his men up the ridge toward the fort. Every step sends stones rolling underfoot. Tripolitan gunners reload and fire. Cannonballs tear through the air, but the Marines keep climbing. In his report, O'Bannon would later write, "The enemy's fire was galling but ill-directed. Their courage failed when we reached their walls." He draws his sword and charges. The fort's gate collapses under musket fire and bayonet thrusts. By noon, the American flag rises above the rampart. For the first time in history, the stars and stripes wave over captured ground on another continent. Down in the city, the people stop fighting. Some cheer for Hamet, others flee toward the harbor. Eaton orders his men to treat the wounded, friend or foe. An Arab fighter offers water to a captured Tripolitan. O'Bannon lowers his sword. The governor flees toward Tripoli before nightfall. In a letter to Jefferson, Eaton writes simply, "Derna is ours." But victory brings a new problem. The city has fallen, but Tripoli still stands. And the Pasha, upon hearing of Derna's fall, sends word to his generals. "Crush the Americans in the sand. Burn their flag and bring me the heads of the infidels who think themselves a nation." The next file opens with the answer to that order, an army marching out of Tripoli, and the Americans waiting in a city they can barely hold. Derna, April 1805, At dawn, the sky over Derna turns white with dust. The city sleeps beneath new colors, the red of the rising sun and the blue of the American flag. Eaton stands on the ramparts, his face cracked by wind and sun. Below him, the narrow streets still smell of smoke and salt. Children peer out from doorways, watching the Marines repair the cannon that once fired on them. For a moment, silence feels like victory. O'Bannon joins him, hat under his arm. "We've done what Europe never dared," he says. Eaton nods, but his eyes stay on the horizon. Out there in the shimmer of heat, riders are gathering, scouts returning from the west. They bring grim news: an army from Tripoli is on the march. 2,000 men, cavalry, artillery, banners black with the Pasha's seal. Eaton doesn't flinch. "Then we hold," he says. "As long as this flag stands, the world will know we came this far." Tripoli, the same day. In his palace, Yusuf Karamanli listens to reports from the front. His generals assure him the Americans are outnumbered, that the desert itself will kill them before his soldiers do. He raises a goblet of sweet wine and murmurs, "Let them rot in Derna. The sand will swallow their courage." But beneath his calm, there is unease. No Corsair has ever faced an enemy who marched across the desert to meet him. The Americans don't play by the old rules, they write new ones. Derna, April 27, 1805. The first attack comes with the morning sun. Tripolitan muskets flash from the dunes. Cannonballs crash against the city walls. O'Bannon's Marines fire in volleys, their rhythm steady, trained. Eaton moves through the lines shouting orders, his voice hoarse but unbroken. The defenders number barely 400. They fight from windows, rooftops, and barricades made from furniture and stone. A shot shatters the parapet near O'Bannon's head. He wipes dust from his face and keeps firing. When his musket jams, he switches to his sword. The enemy surges forward, yelling the Pasha's name. Eaton signals the field gun to fire. The blast sends men and sand flying into the air. The attackers fall back, leaving the dunes littered with smoke and bodies. As night falls, the desert glows red with campfires. The siege has begun. Inside Derna, the Marines dig trenches and ration powder. Eaton writes to the American fleet, "Send reinforcements or send prayers. Either will do." Off the coast, May 1, 1805. In the darkness, the frigate Argus approaches the shore. Its captain, Isaac Hull, reads Eaton's letter under a lantern's glow. He orders the guns loaded and turns to his men. "We'll give them thunder from the sea." At dawn, the Argus opens fire. Cannonballs whistle over the city, striking the Tripolitan camp. From the ramparts, the Marines cheer. The horizon blooms with explosions. Eaton later writes, "The sound of those guns was the voice of home." The Tripolitans scatter under the bombardment, but their resolve hardens. They regroup at night, their chants drifting through the wind like a curse. Derna, May 8, 1805. The second assault is fiercer. They come in waves, firing, shouting, climbing the walls. O'Bannon's Marines fight hand to hand. One is wounded, another collapses from exhaustion. Eaton moves from street to street, directing fire by the light of burning houses. Hamid Karamanli, the exiled prince, rides among his tribesmen shouting, "For my people and for America." His voice carries over the chaos, and for a moment, the defenders believe the desert itself is on their side. When the smoke clears, the attackers retreat again. Derna still stands. Eaton lowers himself onto a broken step, trembling from fatigue. O'Bannon sits beside him, his uniform torn and bloodstained. "They'll come again," he says quietly. Eaton nods. "Then we'll give them the same answer. Tripoli. Later." That week, the Pasha receives another message. Derna still holds. His fury turns to fear. He summons his ministers and demands reinforcements. But whispers fill the palace, that the Americans have magic, that their flag protects them. Superstition spreads faster than truth. Even his generals hesitate. Derna, May 10, 1805. In the city, the people begin to call O'Bannon Amriki Effendi, the American Lord. Eaton writes in his report, "Discipline is our fortress, faith our powder." The Marines teach local children to salute the flag. Each night they sleep on the same walls they defend, rifles beside them, boots as pillows. At sunset, O'Bannon walks the rampart alone. He watches the waves crash below, the desert stretch beyond. For the first time, he understands that victory is not about numbers, but endurance. In the quiet, he whispers a line from Jefferson's letter. "Peace, yes, but peace earned, not purchased." Tomorrow may bring another battle. But tonight the city breathes beneath a foreign flag. And for the first time, the world believes America might outlast empires. Derna, May 11th, 1805. The sun sets red over Derna, the color of dust and blood. The city exhales after a day without gunfire. On the walls, Marines stare into the horizon where the dunes glow faintly under moonlight. The smell of gunpowder still hangs in the air, mixed with the salt of the sea. O'Bannon leans against a cannon, hands wrapped in torn cloth. If they come tonight, he says, we won't see them until they're on the walls. Eaton answers without looking up. Then we'll fight in the dark. Below them, the streets are quiet. Lanterns burn low in shattered windows. Children sleep beside their mothers. A muezzin calls to prayer from a damaged minaret, his voice trembling but clear. The city has learned to pray in whispers. The Marines eat their rations cold, hardtack, water thick with sand. A local boy brings Eaton a handful of dates and a jug of goat's milk. For the men who crossed the desert, he says. Eaton nods and gives him his only silver coin. Tell your father, he says, the desert has friends now. Tripolitan Camp, 2 miles west of Derna. In the enemy camp, fires glow like embers scattered across the dunes. The Pasha's general, Hassan Bey, studies a rough map scratched in the sand. We attack at midnight, he says. The infidels are few, their powder low. Allah will deliver them into our hands. Drums begin to beat, slow and hollow. Horses snort, blades are sharpened. The Tripolitan army moves under the cover of wind. Derna, midnight, the first shots come from the western wall, 2 flashes, then silence. O'Bannon grabs his musket and runs to the parapet. In the distance, the sand moves like a living thing. Hundreds of men advancing, faces hidden by scarves, their torches snuffed out by the wind. To your posts, he shouts. Muskets click in the darkness. Eaton arrives with his pistol drawn. Hold until you see their eyes. The first wave crashes against the wall. The air fills with smoke and shouting. Sparks from musket fire light the faces of men locked in struggle. O'Bannon's sword flashes silver in the dark. A cannon roars from the corner bastion, its recoil shaking the stones. The blast tears through the attackers, but more climb over their fallen. The Marines fire until their barrels glow red. Eaton orders the last reserves to the breach near the market gate. No one steps back, he yells. Not 1 inch. He stands in the opening, coat torn, hair matted with sweat, firing until his pistol clicks empty. A bayonet grazes his arm. He strikes back with the butt of his weapon. Around him, the defenders fight by instinct, thrust, reload, fire, shout, duck. The sound is endless. The harbor. Same night. Out at sea. The Argus anchors in darkness, her crew watching the flashes from the city. Captain Hull clenches his jaw. We can't fire. We'll hit our own men. He listens to the faint echo of muskets carried by the wind. They're on their own tonight. Derna, 3 a.m. The battle shifts house to house. A shell sets a roof ablaze. Sparks fall like rain. O'Bannon pulls a wounded Marine from the rubble. The man grips his hand, whispering, Don't let them take the flag. O'Bannon nods. They won't. When the attackers finally retreat, the city is half in ruins. The streets are lined with bodies, Tripolitans and Americans side by side. The defenders are too tired to cheer. They simply stand where they fought, breathing hard, staring at the horizon where dawn begins to pale the sky. Eaton looks around him at the broken walls and the flag still flying. We're not soldiers, he says quietly. We're a statement. O'Bannon sits beside a fallen cannon, hands shaking from exhaustion. What kind of statement, he asks. Eaton answers, that liberty doesn't hide behind oceans. Tripoli. The next morning, in his palace, the Pasha listens to his messengers report the failure. He crushes a pomegranate in his hand. Red juice drips onto the map. Send everything, he orders. Every man, every horse. I want Derna erased. But even as he speaks, he knows the cost. The Americans have already done what no empire achieved. They planted a flag in the sand and refused to let the wind take it. Derna. Sunrise. The first light touches the city's walls, turning the bullet holes gold. Eaton walks the rampart, each step leaving a dark print in the dust. He stops beneath the flag, its edges scorched but still bright. We lived through the longest night, he writes in his journal, and found morning waiting for us. Below, the sea glitters with the light of the rising sun. The war is not over, but the world has changed. A young nation has proved it can bleed and still keep its promise. Derna, May 13, 1805. Morning comes with silence. Not peace, just the kind of quiet that follows exhaustion. The men on the walls barely speak. They stare at the desert where the Tripolitan camp once stood. The wind scatters black banners across the dunes like ravens taking flight. O'Bannon lowers his musket and wipes the sand from his eyes. "They're gone," he mutters. Eaton answers softly, "For now." Below, the streets begin to stir. Children step out of hiding, carrying buckets to fetch water from the wells. Women sweep rubble into piles. The flag above the fort stirs in the breeze, torn, dusty, but defiant. A crowd gathers beneath it, whispering in Arabic. The Americans still hold. Eaton walks among the wounded. Some lie on stretchers, others sit propped against the walls, faces pale and eyes unfocused. He kneels beside one young Marine whose hands are black with powder burns. The boy looks up, half smiling. "Did we win, sir?" Eaton pauses. "We did more than that," he says. "We proved we belong." Tripoli, the same day. In the palace of Yusuf Karamanli, the sound of breaking glass echoes through marble halls. The Pasha's rage has turned to dread. His brother Hamet holds a city in his name. Foreign soldiers have crossed his desert, and the great powers of Europe are watching. Every messenger brings worse news, defections, shortages, whispers of rebellion. The Pasha demands reinforcements, but his officers glance away. The Ottoman governor in Tunis sends him a discreet warning. "Peace while you still can." The British consul writes privately to London. A lesson in American perseverance has humbled the Crescent. Derna, 2 days later. Eaton writes by candlelight, his hand trembling from fatigue. His dispatch to Commodore Samuel Barron reads like both report and prayer. The enemy attacked in force and were repelled. The city is ours. The flag stands over Derna, and the inhabitants have declared allegiance to Hamet Karamanli. The garrison awaits further instruction. He folds the letter, seals it with wax, and hands it to a courier bound for the coast. "If we hold this city long enough," he says to O'Bannon, "Tripoli will fall without another shot." O'Bannon studies the horizon. "Or they'll send more men and we'll die here." Eaton smiles thinly. Then history will remember why. That night, rain falls for the first time in weeks. The soldiers tilt their heads to the sky, mouths open to catch it. The rain smells of salt and dust. For a moment, the desert feels alive again. Off the coast, USS Constellation, a message arrives by small boat. Commodore Barron reads Eaton's report aloud on the quarterdeck. Around him, officers exchange glances of disbelief. One mutters, "They crossed the desert and took a city with 8 Marines." Barron says nothing. He stares toward the African coast and finally whispers, "Then the Republic has teeth." He sends word to Washington. Jefferson receives it at Monticello, the ink smudged from the journey. The president reads in silence. When he finishes, he says to his secretary, "Tell Congress our flag now flies on the shores of Tripoli." Tripoli, June 1805. Defeat creeps through the palace like smoke. The Pasha can no longer ignore what Derna means. His tribute ports are closing. His allies withdraw their support. He summons the Swedish envoy, then the Danish, then finally the American negotiator Tobias Lear. The talks last 3 nights. Each morning the Pasha demands gold. Each night Lear refuses. At last Lear says quietly, "We offer peace, not payment." The Pasha hesitates. For the first time, he is the one who must choose between pride and survival. On June 10th, he signs the Treaty of Tripoli. Hostilities cease. Prisoners are exchanged. The war that began with tribute ends with recognition. Derna. 1 week later, a messenger rides into the city carrying the news. Eaton breaks the seal and reads it aloud to his men. Peace concluded. American forces to withdraw. All prisoners to be released. The Marines cheer faintly, too tired for celebration, but smiling all the same. O'Bannon climbs the rampart and looks out at the sea. Ships wait at anchor, their sails gleaming in the sunlight. He feels the weight of months lift from his shoulders. "So it's over," he says. Eaton joins him. "Wars end," he replies, "but what they prove doesn't." Together they watch as the flag above Derna ripples in the wind one last time before being carefully lowered. It is stained with sand and smoke, but still whole. The locals watch in silence as the Americans prepare to leave. A man steps forward, a merchant who once called them invaders, and says quietly, "The desert remembers who keeps his word." Eaton shakes his hand. Then let it remember this too, he says. Freedom is not a gift. It's a debt we keep paying. The ships weigh anchor. Drums beat slowly. The Marines march through the streets they once fought for, their shadows stretching long across the stones. Children wave, and some of the women throw rose petals from the windows. By dusk, the sails catch the wind. Derna fades into gold light and distance. Behind them, a city rebuilt in courage. Ahead, an ocean wide enough to carry a nation's first victory home. Tripoli Harbor, June 12, 1805. The sea is calm again, as if the war never happened. Gulls circle above the harbor and the smell of tar and salt hangs thick in the air. A small American schooner drifts under the white walls of Tripoli's fortress. Its sails bear no cannons, only a flag. The envoy Tobias Lear stands at the bow, hat in hand. His uniform is immaculate, his eyes steady. Behind him, a handful of Marines in faded blue watch the city that had once demanded tribute from the world. Tripoli rises before them. Its minarets pale against the morning sky, the ruins of bombardment still visible. On the walls, Ottoman sentries glance down, curious but silent. Lear carries the treaty signed only 2 days ago. The ink is still fresh, the words fragile. Peace and friendship between the United States of America and the Pasha of Tripoli. For the first time, an American ship enters these waters not as prey, but as an equal. Inside the Pasha's palace, the same morning, Yusuf Karamanli sits on a divan surrounded by his guards. His face is unreadable, but the lines around his eyes betray sleepless nights. When Lear is announced, the room falls silent. The two men bow slightly. No smiles, only protocol. The United States accepts peace, Lear says. No tribute will be paid. The Pasha nods once. And my prisoners. They will be returned, Lear answers. All of them. A servant pours thick coffee into gold-rimmed cups. For a moment, neither man speaks. Outside, cannon fire echoes from the harbor. Not in anger, but in salute. The treaty has been ratified. The longest shadow of the Barbary coast begins to fade. Off the coast, USS Constitution, from the deck of the great frigate, the crew watches the city shimmer in the heat. O'Bannon leans on the railing, the wind tugging at his coat. Strange, he says to Eaton, who stands beside him. All this fighting, and it ends with ink and handshakes. Eaton studies the horizon. That's how real victories end, he says. With silence, not drums. The Constitution's guns fire a ceremonial volley toward the shore. The echo rolls over the sea like thunder, one final sound of power. In Tripoli, people step onto their rooftops to watch. Some cheer, others whisper prayers. The American flag waves from the masthead, reflected in the calm water below. Washington, autumn 1805, months later, the letter arrives in Jefferson's study. His hands tremble slightly as he reads, peace secured. American prisoners released, tribute abolished, victory complete. He sets the parchment down and gazes out the window at the Virginia hills. We have paid them in courage instead of coin, he murmurs. For a moment, he allows himself a rare smile. The young republic has stood against the old empires and won. He writes a single line in his journal that night. Let our flag speak for itself. It has earned the right. Derna. Months later, the city still bears the scars of battle. The walls are pocked with cannon holes and the markets are quieter than before. Yet life has returned. Traders shout in the streets again. The call to prayer echoes from repaired minarets. On a small stone near the western gate, someone has carved in rough English letters. Here the Americans stood. A sailor from a merchant ship stops to read it, then salutes. Far above, a tattered remnant of the old flag flutters from a pole. Faded now, but untouched by time. The locals still call it Alam al-Amriki, the American banner. Philadelphia, 1806, the Marines march down Chestnut Street, drums beating in measured rhythm. Crowds cheer from balconies. The officers wear new uniforms now, their swords polished, their boots shining. Among them is Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon, his face bronzed from the African sun. On his chest glints a jeweled sword, a gift from Hamid Karamanli himself. A child in the crowd calls out, "Where's Derna?" O'Bannon pauses, smiles, and answers softly, far away. But it remembers. The parade passes under banners reading "The Shores of Tripoli." The words will later be stitched into the Marines' hymn, immortalizing a battle fought by men who crossed a desert for a promise. Tripoli. Years later, old Yusuf Karamanli sits by the window staring at the sea. The world has moved on. Corsairs now rot in their harbors and European flags crowd the Mediterranean, but sometimes in the wind that sweeps across the bay, he hears a faint echo of drums from Derna, the sound of strangers who refuse to kneel. He mutters to himself, the Americans, they came as traders and left as conquerors. Then, softer, and they never came again. Epilogue, a legacy of sand and salt. From that war, a tradition was born, the idea that America would face threats far beyond its shores not with gold but with resolve. The Marines who fought at Derna left behind more than a city. They left an identity. In every Marine barracks to come, their story would be told, of a handful of men who crossed a desert to plant a flag where no one thought it could stand. Of Eaton, who believed diplomacy could ride on horseback. Of O'Bannon, whose sword gleamed under foreign suns. The First Barbary War faded into memory, but its lesson endured, that liberty once carried overseas changes those who bear it and those who witness it. And long after the last survivor of Derna was gone, the wind over the Mediterranean still whispered the words carved in stone. Here the Americans stood.